So ultimately, though, and this is the exciting bit, it has really, really paid off. So tell us the next installment. You write the book.
But you also find cold water swimming, don't you?
Yes. So tell us all about
Yes. So the cold water swimming came before the book, not before the writing. I've always done writing as a kind of a relaxant and a leisure thing, but it's just been a hobby throughout all of the high-tech career that I had. Cold water swimming, it was just like a draw. And the first time I really experienced it was, we were on holiday in Swanage in Dorset, and we used to go there every year when the kids were little, and it was like a real happy place for me. And it was probably about, I'm trying to think, the kids were, I think, 3 and 1. So really not long after Brian's death, maybe like 3 years after he died. So I was functioning and fine, in inverted commas, but really I felt like the light had gone out behind my eyes. Something just really wasn't right. I was still in early stages. And when we were there, I saw an advert for a sea swim. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to enter that. And my family were like, what do you mean? You don't swim? Are you going to drown? You've got 2 kids. What are you talking about? And I was like, no, I'm going to enter it. It's fine. So I signed up to do this 500-meter sea swim, and they were all looking at me like, you're nuts. And I was like, yeah, I just feel like I need to do it. And I turned up at this sea swim in Swanage, and I had on my Marks and Spencer swimming costume and flip-flops, and I didn't even have a swim hat, because why the fuck would I have a swim hat? I mean, seriously, those things are like school PE torture. And when I turned up, everyone was in like wetsuits and boots and hats and goggles, and I was like, oh fuck. Okay, I've really underestimated this. But I thought, right, in for a penny, in for a pound. So I went in and I did the swim, and it was amazing. I got in that water and I was freezing because I didn't have a wetsuit. It was summer, so it was seas in the summer in the UK, so it wasn't that bad. But I was just like, wow, it just awoke something in me. And do you know what? It's back to coming into the present. That whole thing about the air traffic control or the cold water. It brought me straight into the moment, and I felt this euphoric joy. And we know now that cold water swimming has become such a big thing, that there is a lot of physiological responses that are explained by that. But I just came out and I was grinning, and I felt this real shifting of grief in a really profound way, a small way, but a really profound way, and just felt this joy. And I was like, God, that was amazing. I think I want to do it again. And then I think the next year on holiday, we were up in Scotland, and there was a swim in Loch Lomond, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And I'm terrified of deep, dark water. I also have this, I am so scared of it. And it's not just about being the Jaws generation. I mean, in my mind, there are like dead bodies at the bottom of every lake. It's like some cold, pale hand is going to come up and grab my legs. And, there are fish in there, and there are weeds. And if something touches my leg. But I was like, yeah, got in, did this Loch Lomond swim. And again, I had that feeling and the sense of wonder and accomplishment that I was doing this, that I was doing this. I'm not sporty. I'm not brave. I can't do these things. I was like, I did that. I nailed that. And then I just started doing it more and more often. So that became a pastime, and I started doing it locally, regularly, in an amazing lake down the road from where I live. When I left my job and set up the coaching business, the other thing that was going alongside that was, right, I'm going to write a book. So people had said to me all my life, you're a great writer, you should really write. And I was like, yeah, but what am I going to write? I don't know what I'm going to write. So again, I started writing. For me, it's all about holding people's stories, which is where it aligns with the coaching in a lot of ways. I love talking to people. I love being with people, meeting people, holding their tales and sharing stories. And so I had this collection of various stories, and I was swilling around what to do with it. And then I met a group of women at the local lake who I found out were swimming the English Channel as a relay team for charity. And I was like, right, there's a focus. It fits in, it's the water. So I started chatting to these women and gathering their stories. And then lockdown happened. And so I couldn't see them anymore, and I couldn't train with them. But what did happen during lockdown is then my conversation obviously went online, which meant that I could suddenly speak to people in different areas. And it hadn't occurred to me that this would go this way. So before I knew it, I was getting connected to women all over the world. And I started speaking to women from Fiji to Finland to South Africa to Canada about their experiences in the open water. And my book started to take a real direction, and it's not just about swimming. I mean, it covers water births and women's experiences in water, and how we're primarily connected to water, and how like the ebb and flow of the tides, how we represent that within our female bodies, and all those kind of ideas as well. But it was just extraordinary. And I remember one of the women I spoke to quite early on was an incredible woman called Jamie Monaghan, and she is a multiple world record holder, marathon swimmer. She has swam around Manhattan Island in New York 4 times consecutively, the only person in the world ever to have done so. Swam an ice mile, I think probably the coldest ice mile ever in the Arctic, in the Antarctic. She's done these incredible swims. And I remember chatting to her online in New York, and what I loved about it was, it sounds very cliched again, but it's not this sort of like, oh, who's done it faster or longer or colder or stronger. It was just like the feminine, the experience of doing these events and doing these things. And so when I spoke to Jamie about her ice mile swim in the Arctic, what really struck me was not about her. She wasn't talking about her records or her feats and achievements. She was speaking to me about the experience, and she said what really struck her when she was out there was the taste of an iceberg. So as she was swimming through the water in the Arctic, she could taste the glacial clear water melting and meeting the salt of the sea. And she said it was just that. And I thought, oh my God, that's it. That's a chapter, the taste of an iceberg, because that sums up everything. It's about being in that moment, about noticing, about what's happening in our planet on a grand scale when you're having that sort of thought during that moment. And just extraordinary. So I ended up speaking to people like her, and then speaking to people like me who, are ordinary women, and then the woman next door who's done this and that and the other. And it's just become this glorious collection of what water, how we relate to each other, how we connect to ourselves, how we connect to each other as women, and how we connect to our environment through water, and what that brings everybody.